Tune into any legitimate news outlet nowadays, and you will see multiple stories about the challenges, opportunities, and solutions to address the climate crisis. Sadly, that's because the effects of global warming are now frighteningly obvious, and billion-dollar climate disasters are happening more and more frequently. In the United States, 72% of the population says global warming is happening, and here in Dallas County, 77% of the population says global warming is happening. Fewer and fewer people in the United States question the reality of global warming and its varied widespread effects on our people, our planet, and our prosperity. Some reporters are still advocating that if we all make small changes in our own lives, the crisis will be solved. But we all know that individual actions alone will not solve the climate crisis. Our intuition tells us that turning out our lights and turning off the water while we brush our teeth are not enough to stop and reverse the emissions we continue to spew into our atmosphere or conserve the amount of water needed to supply the ever-growing number of human beings on this beautiful planet. But does that mean we should give up on individual actions? No. Does that mean we shouldn't make small changes in our lives as individuals? Absolutely not. We make these small changes because it empowers us and makes us feel confident in our right and responsibility to advocate for change on a larger scale. We can't expect businesses or the government to make large-scale changes unless we are willing to take action ourselves. We can't expect our legislators to know what we expect of them unless we tell them. We can't influence our family and friends except by walking the talk and being a role model. There's a famous quote about children. It says, "Kids don't do what you say, they do what they see." How you live your life is their example. We believe this is true for adults also. The best way to influence those around you is to let your actions speak for you. Dallas College teaches its students and employees that we have all the solutions we need right here and right now to solve the climate crisis. And it's our responsibility to do what we can in our own circle of influence. What you'll find is that the more you do as an individual, the more your circle of influence will expand, and you will be the change you wish to see. Our final keynote speaker of the day was the organizer, instigator, and coordinator of the Carbon Almanac, It's Not Too Late, the book that each of you received 2 copies of today. One is from Dallas College to keep, and one is from the Carbon Almanac Network to give away. Seth Godin is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and speaker. In addition to launching one of the most popular blogs in the world, he has written 20 best-selling books, including The Dip, Linchpin, Purple Cow, Tribes, and What to Do When It's Your Turn and It's Always Your Turn. His book, This Is Marketing, was an instant bestseller around the world. The latest book is The Practice, and creatives everywhere have made it a bestseller. Seth realizes that the climate crisis and sustainability have a marketing problem. With the help of hundreds of volunteer collaborators, they created the book, The Carbon Almanac, It's Not Too Late, to address that challenge. By focusing on everything from effective marketing and leadership to the spread of ideas and changing everything, Seth has been able to motivate and inspire countless people around the world. So please give a round of applause for your keynote speaker, Seth Godin.
Hi, my name is Seth Godin. Thank you for joining me. I really want to thank the amazing team at Dallas College for having me, for the work they do, for the leadership that they bring to the table. I'm lucky enough that I've been involved over the last year as a volunteer as the organizer, instigator, and coordinator of a new book called The Carbon Almanac. I'm here to talk about the world we live in, where we're going, and what we can do about it. I'm here to help you see that there is a way toward better. That if you open any newspaper, if you visit any website, talk to anybody, check out TikTok, we're surrounded by people who are arguing with each other, who are panicking, who are trying to push us away. And it's easy, particularly as a young person, to lose hope. It's easy to imagine that things can't possibly get better. But the subtitle of our book is Not Too Late. And what does that even mean? What it means is that a generation, mine, in the last 100 years, has built a world around us based on some misunderstandings, some selfish short-term thinking, and now we're in a jam. But it's not too late. It's not too late because if we understand, because if we take action, because if we talk about it, because if we change the systems, we can make things better. So, where to begin? We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about whether or not the climate is changing, because the climate is changing, and people who are well-intentioned and are aware understand that the climate is changing. Climate is not weather. The weather is what's happening out your window right now. The weather is what might be around tomorrow. Climate is different. Climate is what happens over the course of months or years. Climate is compared to the average. Climate is everything that is around us, and it is changing. By every measure that we can use, what we see is that the earth is getting warmer. And there's a lot of pressure on us. People talk about saving the earth. Guess what? The earth is going to be fine. The earth will do fine without us. The real question is, how will we as humans who are just getting started in the world, humans who are old like me, humans in between, how will we figure out a way to not only do our duty the best we can for the people around us, but to thrive in a world that's changing? Some people call that sustainability. Some people worry about resilience. But first, we have to understand. So let me start by explaining something that a lot of people don't really understand. When people talk about the change in the atmosphere, when people talk about greenhouse gases, when people talk about carbon, it's easy to misunderstand because we can look through the air on almost any day and we can see. It's not like we are living in a world filled with black smoke. So here on the screen in front of me, you'll have to look really careful, are 10,000 dots. Those green dots, 100 by 100. 100 times 100 is 10,000. There are 10,000 green dots on that screen in front of me. Now, if you take a deep breath, you will be sucking in a lot of air. You will be sucking in, for the sake of this conversation, 10,000 bits of air. And for a really long time, for tens and tens and tens of thousands of years, of those 10,000 dots, 3 of them were carbon. 3 out of 10,000. That's like less than an inch on a football field of 100 yards. 3 out of 10,000. And right now, take another breath. There's 4. The air around us has 4 out of 10,000 dots of carbon. And when it gets to 5, the earth as we know it will never be the same. When it gets to 5, sea levels will have risen so much that New Orleans, Miami, and New York City will be completely underwater. When it gets to 5, there will be entire parts of the planet where humans cannot live outdoors for more than 30 minutes at a time, no matter what they're doing to protect themselves. We're at 4. We used to be at 3. This chart, super simple. You don't have to like graphs. You don't have to like math. This chart, super simple, shows us what the global average temperature change was for the last 2,000 years. And you can see what has happened since you were born. Now, if this was your bank account, you would certainly notice it. If this was the temperature when you took your temperature when you didn't feel well and used a thermometer, you would notice it. If this was the number of friends you had, this is something that you would notice. And this is what is happening to our climate. Here's another one, even more vivid. This is historical temperature anomalies in Australia. I mean, more or less than people expected, more or less than the average. And throughout the first half of the 1900s, if something weird was going to happen, it was going to get colder than expected. You can see what is happening. It is really clear. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to go outside and say, the climate is changing. So, what should we do about it? Well, here's the thing. At some level, it's simple. It's simple because the number of carbon dots has gone up. It's simple because we understand exactly what is happening to the climate. But it's also complicated. It's complicated because we live in a world that for over 120 years has had a bonanza due to cheap energy. Cheap energy. And Texas is one of the centers of cheap energy. Made us all rich. Cheap energy enabled the world around us. Not just cars, not just air travel, but food and beef and buildings and milk from a fridge. That the number of people on a percentage basis that are in severe poverty has gone down dramatically because of cheap energy. And cheap energy creates systemic changes. So what I want to talk about for a little while is what I mean by systemic changes. To do that, I'm going to talk about something that has very little to do with climate, but is easy to understand. Because once we understand systems, then we can start to talk about what we can do toward a sustainable future. I want to talk about Halloween. Halloween? Yeah, Halloween. Halloween is a system. And it is a system in which lots of people participate. Not just the kids who trick or treat and go door to door. Not just the parents who have to go and buy lots of cheap chocolate bars. But the companies that sell the cheap chocolate bars. The companies that sell Halloween costumes. The entire industry that's built around a simple idea. It turns out that some of the poorest people in the world who have a job are cacao farmers. Cacao farmers are men, families, who go into the fields and pick cacao. If you've never seen it before, this is what it looks like. It's not a bean. They're called cocoa beans, but they're not beans. It's a fruit. This thing grows on a tree, and this is a dried one. And when it's fresh, what the farmers will do is take it off the tree, cut it open, leave it in the sun, let it ferment, then let it dry, then roast it. And then the chocolate makers will take the nibs out of the little shells and turn those into chocolate. The thing is, if you are Nestle's or you are Mars, and Halloween is a big deal for you, if you make most of your money selling $2 Hershey bars, what you want is cheap chocolate. Cheap chocolate is a key part of the system of Halloween. Well, there's a couple different kinds of cacao trees, Trinitario, Criollo, Forastera. But Forastera beans are the easiest to grow. They're the hardiest trees. You can get the chocolate cheaper. It doesn't taste as good, and it's a little bit more expensive for the farmers to go to the trouble of raising because it doesn't live as easily in the ecosystem as other forms of cacao. But because it's all the same, because the chocolate companies don't care where it came from, Madagascar, the Ivory Coast, Nicaragua, you get the idea, it's an auction for the cheapest possible chocolate. And because the cheapest possible chocolate is part of the system, chocolate farmers end up making $3, $4, $5 a day for their hard work. So, if we thought that the way to solve this problem was to say to people, please don't buy cheap chocolate, not a lot would get better because people are going to buy cheap chocolate. No, the way to make things better is to do what my friend Sean Askinosie did. Sean Askinosie was one of the first bean-to-bar chocolate makers. He got on a plane and flew to the Philippines. He got on a plane and flew to Tanzania, and he met with the farmers. He taught them how we make chocolate. He had them taste chocolate, some for the first time ever. He pays them 5 times more than the other companies do. He puts their kids through private school. This is his team in Missouri. They use open book management. What Sean did was he created an entirely different way for people to engage with chocolate. So this has nothing to do with energy and everything to do with energy. Nothing to do with sustainability and everything to do with it. Because one person showed up and said, I want to change a system. And because he succeeded, other companies copied him. And now there are hundreds of companies who are going beyond fair trade. Hundreds of companies that are making chocolate that is more delicious. Hundreds of companies that are working hard to change a system. And here you are, the future. I'm not the future, I'm the past. You're the future. And the future needs somebody who can see the systems, and work to change them. So we need to take a minute to look at this chart. This chart's really important. It's from a guy named Rogers. He called it the product adoption life cycle. And what this shows us is that in any population, 2.5% of the people are innovators. They like to do things first. They like to go first. 13.5% of the people are early adopters. They're the people who follow the people who go first, but they do it because it works. The next 68% of the people are the masses, and the last 15% are called laggards. They still have a 12 flashing on their VCR. So if we think about any population, you might be an innovator when it comes to, say, shoes, when it comes to hot sauces, when it comes to something you care about in the technology world. Maybe you bought an iPhone the first day the new unit was on sale, the new version. But probably not. Probably you waited a month or two until your friends had one and they told you how much better it was, and then you got one. Maybe you have an Android phone. Most people do. You're in the masses. Maybe you have a BlackBerry. You're a laggard, and you don't want anything to change. When we think about climate, what we see is that we have a significant systems problem, and that most people are in the middle and are laggards, because they always are. Most people don't want the world to change. Most arguments about climate and systems change are not actually about science. They're not from people who actually understand what's going on. They're from people who are saying as clearly as they can, please don't change anything. So it took me 15 minutes to warm up to the simple question in front of us. More or less? Because the environmental movement for a long time has been about less. Eat less, do less, drive less, fly less, have fewer kids, less. Human beings are a problem. We need less. But it is also possible to think about our future in terms of more. That we can change systems that have gotten us stuck. And if we change those systems, we can have more equity and more fairness and more free energy and more clean air. And understanding this, having the conversation, that's what this is for. There is plenty of information in the world that you can look up if you want to. There's a great book that I highly recommend called The Wizard and the Prophet. And the thesis of the book is that the origins of the environmental movement and the movement to feed the poor go back almost 100 years. Two men, one called the Wizard and one called the Prophet. The Wizard said technology will save us. We need more fertilizer. We need hybridized grains. We can feed more people. He won a Nobel Prize for it. The Prophet, on the other hand, said human beings are a problem. We need less of everything. And you can be a wizard and you can be a prophet. Either one is okay with me. But don't be an ostrich. Being an ostrich, sticking your head in the sand and saying, well, I recycle, what's the problem, is the problem. And I am here not to tell you that it is a bad idea for you to make a smaller footprint on the earth. It is not a bad idea for you to back off on air conditioning and coal and concrete and all the other things that we do as humans. But it is not nearly enough. It is not nearly enough for us to be seduced by what we have been indoctrinated in, seduced by believing that if we just did a little bit less, everything would be fine. Everything is not going to be fine if we don't change the system. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm talking to you today from where I live, 13 miles north of New York City, one of the great cities of the world. 100 years ago, New York City, 140 years ago, New York City almost shut down forever. New York City wasn't going to work. And the reason is simple, because people were peeing in the Hudson River. People were dumping their sewage in the river that's right outside my door. That river was supplying much of what New York City needed, and people were getting sick. It turned out that saying to people, please don't pee in the river, was insufficient. That is not helpful. It's not going to work. What they needed to do was two things. One, build a sewer system, and two, make it against the law to pee in the river. They made systems change. They didn't just go to people and say, please do a little bit less. Right near where you are right now, I'm guessing, is a school zone. School zone is a place where there's a special speed limit, 15 miles an hour. The thing is, when cars were first invented, there were no speed limits. When cars were first invented, tens of thousands of pedestrians were killed until they figured out things like crosswalks and school zones and speed limits. And people accepted them because they understood that you really don't want to run a kid over in front of a school. We don't put up a big sign in front of the school and say, please, if you can, drive a little bit slower. That one person driving a little bit slower isn't going to help the kids. That what we needed to do was change the system and make a rule. And we said, this is a school zone, and we don't speed around here. And everyone has accepted that. No one has said it is a matter of my personal freedom to drive as fast as I want in front of an elementary school, because it's not. We understand that the systems exist to help us. So the system I came here to talk about today started right outside your window in 1900. In 1900, they were digging for oil in Texas, and they hit Spindletop. And for 9 days, Spindletop was a gusher. For 9 days, it pumped millions of barrels of oil onto the ground. And that was the birth of Texaco. And that was the birth of Texas as a world power. And ever since then, what we have done is embraced the stuff that comes out of the ground, cheap energy, as a fuel for the life we live. And if we don't change that system together, it doesn't matter one bit if you cut back. It will not matter one bit if you try a little bit harder to change your life. Just like it doesn't matter that much if you drive a little bit more slowly in a school zone, or if you resist the urge to pee in the Hudson River. So let's think a little bit more about systems. Let's say I'm an evil James Bond genius, and I don't know, it's 1650, and my goal is to kill all the whales in the world. Well, one thing I could try to do is get a whole bunch of harpoons and go chase as many whales as I can. That's not going to work. But something else did work. What worked is that someone figured out that whale oil, which you can only get by killing a whale, is a really good way to light your house at night. And once that happened, an industry was created about whale oil, not just whale hunting, but refining whale oil, selling the lanterns that work with lead. A whole bunch of people made money killing the whales. That is what happens when a system falls into place. And we now have a system all around us. Tim Wu calls it the tyranny of convenience. And it's pretty simple. Human beings, particularly in this country, will give up almost anything for convenience. We will give up our privacy. We will give up our money. We will give up our freedom if we can get something a little faster and a little cheaper. And so we are stuck on our phones because they deliver us something a little faster and a little cheaper. We are surrounded by a system based on convenience. And when something shows up that demands we do something inconvenient, we are likely to resist it. And guess what? Carbon is demanding that. Here's an easy way to remember the four biggest challenges we are facing: coal, concrete, combustion, and cows. Coal. Because when we burn coal, it's like the crack cocaine of carbon. When we burn coal, we are taking something that has been in the ground for a very, very long time, that is pure carbon, and we are burning it to make power, and that is contributing a huge amount of those 4 dots that we are living with right now. Number 2 is concrete, which surprises a lot of people. But it turns out building materials, especially concrete, contribute 8% of all of the human-based carbon in the air. Largely because when we make concrete, we use coal to build a furnace that powers it to over 2,000 degrees just to make the stuff that's in concrete. The third one is combustion, which obviously is redundant to coal. But combustion is what happens when you get in a car and turn on the engine. Combustion is what happens when you use gas or other things that you can burn for hot water or other things in your life. And the fourth one is cows. Yes, cows. And the reason for cows is cows burp a lot. And when a cow burps, it releases methane. Methane is a gas like carbon dioxide. However, in the first 15 or 20 years that methane is in the air, it is 80 times more powerful on our climate than carbon dioxide is. 80 times. If I offered you $100 or $8,000, you would notice the difference of 80 times as much. Cows are a problem that I'm going to get into in a minute, but they are one of the big 4, and they're the one that we can do the most systems change with in the shortest period of time. So let's talk about systems change. Let's talk about leaf blowers. Now, if we say to people, please don't use a leaf blower, they will keep using a leaf blower. Why? Because there is a system in place. And the system is, if I'm a landscaper, I am paid to landscape this person's yard. They don't care how I do it. If I can do it faster and cheaper, I get to keep the money. So when you say to a landscaper, please don't use a leaf blower, please, they're not going to listen to you because the system that's in place doesn't reward them for changing. And if I tell you, and you can look it up, that a leaf blower in 1 hour emits as much carbon as driving this car from Los Angeles to New York over the course of a week, you start to understand that leaf blowers might be a problem. But the answer isn't, please don't use a leaf blower. The answer is to make leaf blowers against the law. Because it turns out electric leaf blowers work just as well as gas-powered ones. They are ultimately cheaper, quieter, easier to use, and better for the people who are using them. But we're not going to switch because we want to. We're going to switch because we have to. My town, leaf blowers are against the law. What about yours? How many people who are listening to this would need to organize, to get together, to have a conversation to make leaf blowers against the law in your town? The answer is a very small number. That the way we live in community, culture, isn't based on just how a human being acts when no one is watching. It is based largely on how we as a community do things around here. People like us do things like this. Your real job is not to change your personal behavior. Your real job is to sign up other people to organize systemic change. That we sent you to school for more than 12 years. School that was organized by big corporations so that you would be an obedient cog in the system they needed when they hired you, so that you would take good notes, get an A on the test, ask, will this be on the test? Do what you are told. We didn't, over the course of those years that you were in school, encourage you to be an organizer, to speak up, to ask about the systems, to look with a very thoughtful eye about what you were being told, the lies that you were hearing, whether they were lies or not. We need to understand the systems because the systems have indoctrinated us into thinking that they are normal. They are not normal. So I want to go through 4 of the pieces of indoctrination. I'm going to call them lies because they were intentionally lies that you might still believe. The first one is this. British Petroleum, one of the 5 biggest oil companies in the world, in the 1980s, 40 years ago, hired one of the most famous ad agencies in the world, Ogilvy and Mather. And they said, we need you to invent something. And they invented the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint was invented by an oil company. Why? Why would an oil company say to someone like you, please drive a little bit less? The answer is simple, because they want you to feel shamed. They want you to feel like a hypocrite, because we are all hypocrites. And if you feel like a hypocrite, you might not speak up. If you feel like you're not doing enough, you're not composting, you're not recycling, you won't speak up and try to make systems change. And it worked. It worked better than almost any marketing campaign in history. It took the people who are the most likely to take action, the people who are the most likely to care about this issue, and it silenced them. It pushed them to say, uh-oh, I got in an airplane last year. I better not push for airplane regulation. But we are all hypocrites. Your carbon footprint matters a little bit, for sure. But that's not what I need you to do. That's not what we need you to do. We need you to see beyond each individual's activity and understand the tyranny of convenience, understand the systems and why the systems are there. That when we sell fuel for a tiny fraction of what it actually costs all of us, a whole system is built around it. The second one is that there are people you know who are, quote, climate denialists, which is crazy. There are no gravity denialists. Gravity is real. We can't explain gravity. We don't really understand gravity, but gravity is real. In the almanac is a memo that a chief engineer at Exxon wrote 40 years ago that describes sentence by sentence exactly what the world will be like in 2020. And he was right. To a tenth of a degree, he described exactly how the climate would change due to carbon. There is no productive debate about the human impact on the climate. But beyond that, wasting our time arguing with people who want the world to stay the same when the world isn't staying the same is a waste of time. What we can do instead of trying to have a debate with people who aren't actually interested in a debate, is we can organize the people who do see what is happening. We can organize the people who do understand that it is possible to build a world with clean power, with more equity, with more opportunity, because the change is here. And we can win. We can come out ahead because we embrace the change, and we don't need everybody to go along. We simply need to organize the people who care. The third one, which I promised you I would talk about a little bit more, is cows. That the myth of you don't get enough protein. Well, people in the United States eat more protein than anywhere else in the world. The average person on this planet needs to eat approximately one playing card in size worth of protein a day. In the United States, we spend about half of all of our land, half of all of the land on cattle. In the United States last year, we devoted more than $50 billion taxpayer dollars subsidizing the cattle industry. If everyone in the world ate meat and milk the way we do here, we would need a whole other planet just to hold the cows. The thing is, one glass of milk, not going to make a difference. But if we create systems so that schools serve oat milk instead of milk from cows, if we create systems where the price of beef accurately reflects how much it costs to make, if we create systems where they've got Meatless Monday in your school's cafeteria, those systems move us forward. But if we're just like, please eat a little bit less, it's not going to add up to enough. Around the world, as people get wealthier, one of the first things they do is start eating meat. And the reason is because it's convenient, because it comes with status, because we have a system encouraging people to do that. And the fourth one is plastics recycling. Invented by the plastics industry, again in the 1980s, plastics recycling doesn't work. Maybe sometimes it does. 6 to 9% of all the plastic is recycled, but the rest of it, incinerated. You put that plastic bottle in the blue bin just so that they can burn it. It's not the answer. It's not even the question. And so every time you buy something in plastic and feel better because you're going to recycle it, please know that you got tricked and that what we need instead are systems changes. Put the same energy that you would be spending on your personal footprint into societal change. Speak up, organize, start a book group, figure out where the leverage points are. Because here's the thing about the whales. You know what saved the whales? It wasn't somebody saying, please don't use whale oil. It was kerosene. When kerosene came along, suddenly there was a better, more convenient alternative to whale oil. And it was almost too late for the whales, but they're still around because we switched. Guess what? Solar and wind in most parts of the world are now cheaper than oil. Guess what? Over the last year in China, they have built more than 50 solar and wind plants, enough to replace the similar number of coal plants. They haven't done the replacement yet, but they are building new systems. What we need you to do is to get smart about what you're seeing. I think about private jets. There was a story in the New York Times the other day about France considering banning private jets. Here's the caption in the Times story. A private jet in Nice, France. Such planes are said to cause more pollution per passenger than commercial planes. Said to? 10 to 30 times more. But the conservative voices that want the systems to stay the same put in words like are said to cause. No, it's not said to cause. They do. That it turns out that private jet travel in France is responsible for 15% of all the emissions from all air travel in France. You need to be smarter about this. You need to be able to see when you're reading something that isn't really true. So here we are at this crossroads, in this moment of more versus less, in this crossroads moment of what are you going to do about it? What the oil companies and the plastics companies want you to do is drive a little bit less, recycle some plastic a little bit more into a bin, maybe put up a poster here or there, because they're intent on digging out of the ground the last asset that they can get. They're just in it to get to where they can retire. But you're going to be around much longer than that, toward more opportunity, toward more justice, toward more efficiency, toward cleaner air, toward things that are quieter, toward more health. All of these things are possible because we now know enough to make a difference. We now have the tools in place to make not just better choices for the environment, but better choices for our family, better choices in a way to make a living. So yes, all around us, there's something just sitting there, waiting to be burned, just sitting there, waiting to be turned into power. It's convenient. It's easy. It's the status quo. But you didn't show up here because that's your goal. Your goal is to make a difference. Your goal is to make things better. So back to this idea of the almanac. Now, I need to be clear. Much of what I just said is my opinion. The facts are in here. And the facts that are in here, you can look them all up. I don't make a penny when someone buys a copy of this book. None of the volunteers involved do. But what we learned from this is that taking action is what makes people feel less depressed. Taking action, knowing that you are showing up on behalf of the people around you, organizing other people, speaking up with confidence, even though every single person in this country is a hypocrite, showing up with confidence to be able to say, oh, you're doing direct air capture. Did you know that that's a fake and it can't possibly work at scale? Not yet. Showing up to be able to organize other people, to speak up, to start small bits of systemic change. I got the idea to put this almanac together when I read a book called The Ministry for the Future. It's heartbreaking and it's beautiful and ultimately inspiring. It's a science fiction book in the near future about what we're going to do on Earth when things get really, really, really bad. And one of the things about this problem, the same way when someone gets skin cancer, is the sooner you act, the easier it is to solve the problem. If we wait until it gets even worse than it is now, when it's hot, people are going to run their AC even more. When they run their AC even more, there's going to be yet another brownout and yet another blackout, and then they're going to be able to figure out how to argue for more coal plants, and on and on and on. In this moment, we have just a couple years for people like you to see the systems that are around us, that we are in this spot where we no longer have to feel just despair, that what we can do is focus on the tactics. What we can do is focus on how ordinary people, people like you, people like me, people who have no authority, are going to show up and say, I see what is happening. I see that there is a path forward. It is not about shaming other people. It is not about simply doing less. No, doing less can't hurt. It is about changing our systems, naming the systems, seeing the systems, and then organizing other people to show up and to say, right here in this institution, in this school, in this village, in this town, in this state, we're going to speak up and speak up and speak up until people understand, until they see what is actually happening around us. Because it is not too late. It is not too late to make things better. And the way we will do that is by making better things, by seeing other people, by changing the systems, by caring enough to honor what came before and to make things better. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to talking with you, and more than that, seeing the ruckus that you are going to make. The last story I'm going to tell you before I go, because it's so easy to feel like we don't have enough to pull it off. About 12 years ago, I got invited to a really cool conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There were authors and playwrights and business people there, but the reason I went is because Neil Armstrong was going to be there. Neil Armstrong, you may know, was the first person to step on the moon. Neil Armstrong was part of the Apollo 11 mission that NASA launched. Well, it was the last night. It was really cold out, like 4 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees. They give us all blankets, and we go out to this mesa. The stars are all out. It's pitch black. They built a big campfire. And we're sitting there huddled by the fire, and Neil Armstrong comes out to tell us about his mission. I think it was his last public appearance. And as he begins to talk, the biggest full moon I've ever seen starts to rise over his shoulder. I think there was some planning involved. And he stops, and he turns, and he says, I've been there. And here's the thing, folks. There are footprints on the moon. And NASA did that. NASA sent people into space and brought them back safely when the sum computing power of the whole institution was less than the phone in your pocket. So when you feel despair about your organizing or about our future, just go outside and look up in the sky and realize that more than 50 years ago, we sent people into space and we brought them back safely. We can do this if we organize, if we understand, and if we take action. Thanks for listening. Good luck to all of us.
Thank you so much, Seth. That was wonderful and entertaining and a little bit terrifying. I want to encourage everyone to submit their questions on Slido. And so we've already have a couple that were sent in while you were speaking. People were really fired up. So in reference to one of your earlier publications, somebody wants to know thinking about sustainability and this, all the projects that you probably see. What do you think is the purple cow of sustainability?
Well, first, thanks everyone for tuning in and sticking around for the Q&A, my favorite part. The book Purple Cow came in a milk carton when I first self-published it. And it's a very simple idea. Ideas that spread win. And what makes something a purple cow is you talk about it. You're not talking about it because other people want you to talk about it. You're talking about it because you want to talk about it. So a video goes viral because other people share it because it's good for them. It helps their esteem or whatever it is. So the challenge we have with sustainability is a lot of things that people are talking about aren't really going to make much of a difference at all. And making something that goes viral is not important when it comes to sustaining our climate. What matters is building something that can persist, because all of the cultural changes of our lifetime didn't happen because someone had a viral moment. It happened because someone persisted consistently, building community and moving forward. And that is what we are seeing happening. We're seeing happening in lots of places. This is not a fad. We're not going to stop talking about this in a few years the way we stopped talking about, I don't know, Ebola. It's going to be something that's going to stick around because it's going to affect more and more people every single day.
And yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So here's something a little bit tougher. So you mentioned the fact that businesses and such have convinced us that all these problems are our fault. And so how do we unbrainwash the people of the world who believe that recycling is failing because we're not doing it right, or there's so much air pollution because we've done something wrong? But we're not the problem. How do we unbrainwash our communities?
These are really profound. So it is all our fault, and it's our grandparents' fault, and the faults of all the people we've invested in the stock market and everything else. I am not implying it's not our fault. What I'm saying is that once you hear that human beings have done this, you can either say, well, I am a particularly bad hypocrite because I live in North America. I'm not living someplace where I use 1/10 or 1/100th the amount of carbon that North Americans do. Therefore, I better just shut up because I feel terrible. Or you can say, oh boy, I'm even more on the hook to do something about this. And what we need to do about it is not lower our personal footprint, because we cannot shrink our way out of this problem. We just can't. What we need to do is create systemic change to fix a systemic problem. And if you're taking the time to be part of this call, if you're taking the time to be part of a conference like this, you've already put in the energy. So instead of worrying about what's going on in your backyard, worry about what's going on in your block or your village or your town or your company. Because just to pick a simple example, when a big company starts shipping things in one kind of box versus another kind of box, and you multiply that, it starts to make a difference. That when people who were in the audiobook business came out with disposable audiobooks, where you would buy one book with a chip, and when you were done listening to the book, you throw it out. Well, we needed a dozen authors to stand up and say, nah, not going to happen with my name on it, because the systemic impact of all of those things getting thrown into the ocean, too much. We need systemic changes. That means you got to speak up, you got to ask hard questions, and you can't stop.
Thank you for that clarification. So I have another deep question for you, because that's what we're getting. What is one value or ethics topic that you think organizations can focus on to lead change?
An ethics topic. So the indoctrination runs really deep. We got taught from a young age that I'm just doing my job is an okay thing to say. To ask, will this be on the test, is an appropriate question. To show up and do what we're told because the system requires it. These are things that we are sort of seduced into believing. The great ethicist Peter Singer asks the following question. If you were walking down the street and you were wearing brand new Bally loafers, $400, and it had rained the night before, and there's a big puddle. Lying face down in the puddle is a 4-year-old girl, an adorable local 4-year-old girl, and she's drowning face down in 3 inches of water. The question Peter asks is, would you run into that puddle to save that girl's life, even though you knew you'd wreck a $400 pair of shoes. Everybody says, sure, of course I would do that. And then he says, well, for half that much money, I can take $200 and save the life of somebody who's 2,000 miles from here or 5,000 miles from here. Where's your $400 now? Because there shouldn't be a difference between somebody who's right in front of us, face down, and somebody who's an ocean away. A life is a life. And so when we go to work and we say, well, it's inconvenient for us to change this system. It's too hard for us to say in our cafeteria we're going to have meatless Mondays and Tuesdays because some of our customers will get mad at us. Well, what you're doing is saying, well, I can't see that girl face down, so I'm not going to worry about it. But the thing is, there's going to be 10 million climate refugees in the next 3 years and 100 million in the 3 years after that. People who have lost their homes because of sea level rise and typhoons and storms. So, yes, your systems change matters if you can do it at scale. And we need to have the ethical conversation of what if it was right here in front of us and what if it was right now, not over there and in 4 years, but right here and right now, because that is a good way for humans to take action.
Excellent. I hope that Brandon appreciated that. So I've heard, when you're talking to deniers or people who kind of turn the whole, too much CO2 in the atmosphere on its head and say, oh, well, it's going to get warmer in Alaska and we'll be able to have wineries there. And I like wine. So this is fabulous. This is an amazing thing. What do you respond? How do you respond to that kind of thinking?
Here's the hard part. Everybody is right all the time. Everyone has a noise in their head, and based on what they know and what they want and what they see and what they believe, they are making the correct choice based on the inputs that they are presented with. Based on the community they are in and the people they want to hang out with and the status that they seek, they are right. Everyone is entitled to their own feelings and their own opinion, but people are not entitled to their own physics. And if you are encountering someone who simply wants to have an argument, and I call these people trolls, you don't have to give them an argument. You're allowed to say, I don't need a unanimous vote here. Let me talk to somebody who wants to learn something. But if someone has an open mind and you can acknowledge that based on who they are and what they see and what they want, they are right, you can say, can I ask you some questions about what's going to happen in Panama? Or can I ask you some questions about what's going to happen in Louisiana? And let's see if we can compare that to a winery in Alaska. Because there's some interesting conversations to have. It's amazing to me how little the smart people I know about what's actually going on, about the methane that's in the permafrost in Alaska. Because it turns out that once a glacier melts, it doesn't come back. And once it melts, the stuff that's under it, that's been locked under the ice for hundreds of thousands or millions of years, thaws out. And a lot of that is methane. And so, yeah, we'll have wineries for a little while, and then we'll have a desert. And we have to decide if that's what we want, and if we want to be an innocent bystander or a guilty bystander, or if we want to do something about it so we can look our kids in the eye and say we tried.
And that's absolutely so important. And those are the conversations that as educators here at Dallas College we're having with our students. And they're just, like we say, we've got until 2030. So come on, guys, let's do this. And the look of absolute sheer panic on their faces. But what do you think about the problem that people have a hard time just wrapping their head around what you were just saying? When the permafrost melts, the methane's going to go into the atmosphere, and it's 80 times more intense than CO2. Is that part of the problem, that people just are incapable of just wrapping their head around the scope of the problem?
So I know people who have died from emphysema. And almost every one of them smoked until the last day. They weren't stupid. They were making different decisions based on different information, based on what they wanted. If I was 22 years old, I would be really rip-roaring angry at people who 20 years ago didn't start taking action. But then I would say, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Because the way a generation thrives is by taking advantage of changes in the world. That in the 60s, transistor radios opened the door for rock and roll. And the reason we had so much rock and roll from 1966 to 1975 is because the world shifted and a whole bunch of 18-year-olds took advantage of it. Well, the world is shifting right now. And if you are at Dallas, if you are 20 years old, if you are somebody who is looking to make a difference in your life, this is the problem for you to work on. And you can curse the darkness or you can light a candle. Hopefully not a candle. You can turn on an electric light bulb, LED, and make a difference. And so, yeah, we got really, really, really bad news in the near future. But we also have fusion right around the corner. We also have countries around the world putting in border taxes and carbon pricing adjustments that are going to turn the ratchet of the marketplace in the other direction. We have people who are making huge breakthroughs, figuring out how to make bricks out of leftover plastic. All of these new industries being built. We are inches away from having unlimited free electricity. What are we going to do with it? Work on that. Work on that. We don't need to persuade some online troll that they're wrong and we're right. We need to get to work.
Absolutely. So I just have one more question for you. Ready? So when you are, when you think about ESG or environmental social governance, that more and more businesses are doing, do you think that this could affect some of the systemic change that's needed?
Don't tell anybody, but it's a really, really cool trap. Because in the short run, companies look like they get status and points by putting ESG goals into their official documents, into their board minutes, into their promises to shareholders. Because in the next year, it's so easy to do. But now they're on the hook. And once they're on the hook, they're going to have to start doing inconvenient things and difficult things. Year after year after year, either you're in or you're out. And if you're in, the ratchet's going to keep turning. And it means that no, American Airlines cannot buy supersonic transport jets that they promise will run on sustainable jet fuel, even though they know that sustainable jet fuel cannot be created. They're just going to have to not do it. And that's what's starting to happen. What's starting to happen is companies like Exxon are looking around and saying, what good does it do us to be rich if there is no planet? And they're starting to make hard choices that eventually will make them a lot of money, but in the short run are really inconvenient. So yeah, lobby for ESG, not because it's going to work this year, because it's not, but because it establishes a framework for what they're going to have to do really soon.
And that worked out really well as the wrap up for this entire discussion. And Seth, we are just so glad you could join us today. Your message is powerful and it is hopeful. And I hope that everyone enjoys their copies of the Carbon Almanac that they received when they are attended in person here in Farmers Branch, Texas. So again, thank you so much, Seth. And we hope you have a wonderful weekend. And everyone, this is the end of our program. Thank you so very much for your attendance today. And we hope that you've enjoyed the 12th annual Dallas College Sustainability Summit. Everyone stay safe. Bye-bye.
Don't make a ruckus.